I don't know how many times I've tried to say this because I cannot explain it well enough for the Malcolm in the Middle revival. It's been at least almost half an hour that I've been trying to think of how to word what I think about this show because it's so weird. Lois is not as fierce as she once was, but she's old, so it makes sense. Hal's still best friends with Abe, and he helps him do the weird singing stuff that he does. Hal still loves Lois like nobody else, of course. Francis still married to Piyama. Okay, they don't have kids, and then somehow she's pregnant by the end of this show, or somewhere in the middle, which makes no sense because they're really old at this point. I think they're like in their mid-40s, or maybe even almost 50, so that didn't make any sense either. And it would have been better if he had some sort of successful job, because they never said what it was by the end of the first show. The original show. I think they did say something, I just can't remember right now. And his friends made cameo, but they were from the first season, so it made no sense at all. And what even made less sense, or no sense whatsoever, was that they were doing kind of crazy stupid shit. They were doing Francis stuff. Everything they did was like Francis, which made no sense because they were always the rational ones trying to get Francis out of trouble because Francis was the one getting into trouble. But, they kind of flipped the script, no idea why. And then Reese, he stayed exactly the same. Exactly the same, which made no sense. You'd think at this point they'd have him grow, that he'd be like a chef, successful chef, like Gordon Ramsay. Because he loves to yell and scream and try to boss people around, so that would have been perfect for him. Plus, he's a perfectionist when it comes to cooking. He loves cooking, and, well, actually, that's like his favorite thing to do. So it would have been the best job for him, but they didn't do that. And Malcolm is all super crazy, like always. They exaggerated a little bit in this show for some reason, but he's still talking to camera, of course. His friends from the first season also, for some reason, appear in this show. And I don't know, they didn't really have a they didn't have a reason to be there. And I don't know, they were saying some weird stuff that didn't make any sense to me. And Stevie, for some reason, they did a complete 180 on him, which was weird too. Again, too many freaking boxes they're checking that did not go with the show. Come on, they did not. If you're going to be doing this kind of stuff, you got to rewatch the original show before you do it. I hate when they do stuff like that. There's other examples, but yeah, we're just going to focus on this show for right now. And then with Malcolm's daughter, they were trying to make her like Malcolm, but it didn't work. It didn't make any sense. The only thing that was kind of okay was her talking to the camera like he did. That was all right. But she was a complete and total outcast with no friends, and nobody liked her. Malcolm, on the other hand, he did have friends when he joined the Krellboyne class or whatever. But didn't even do that with his daughter, which would have made sense. Because then she would have had friends similar to him, but they didn't do that because, I don't know. And it would have probably been better if she would have been more like Francis, like a troublemaker, right? And maybe Cynthia would have been her mom. Like, Cynthia and Malcolm together, I don't know how they could have worked it in there, but it would have made a lot more sense. And as for the youngest daughter, Kelly, Lois's daughter or whatever, she would have made more sense if she was like in that episode of If Boys Were Girls, when Lois imagines having all daughters instead of all boys. Not the way she had imagined them at the beginning of that episode, but like near the end when they were bickering and fighting and whatever. But also, maybe it would have been more sense if she was just like Lois was in high school. Like, and we know how that is because in that one episode, I can't remember the title, Reese finds the diary in his backpack. He thinks it's some girl's diary from a school, but it turns out to be Lois. Maybe that would have made more sense because she would have seen what everybody else sees in her own daughter. That would have made more sense. It would have been good. And you'd think that Dewey and Jamie would have been completely normal since everybody was out of the house at that point. And Dewey would have been a successful pianist. He was being nice to Jamie. He was the only one the parents, I don't say tolerated, but the only one they didn't punish as much. Probably because he was the youngest and not really getting into trouble. But he was also being nice to Jamie. So you'd think Jamie would be the most normal too. But there wouldn't be no way to know which direction they would have sent him because he was a toddler when the show ended. And by the end, Lois is pregnant and, whatever. Now we know she has a daughter. But, they, again, another checkbox that does not go. They were still themselves as individuals, but the way that they tried to interact like they did in the original show, it didn't work. It wasn't the same kind of chemistry. It's like they were trying to copy it, but it didn't work because it's been so long, so they didn't know how to mesh well with that kind of stuff. And yeah. Oh, I was not a fan of the cussing either, because when the show was on TV, the original show, obviously it was for preteens or teenagers, whatever. So obviously they couldn't cuss, but it didn't go with it either. That did not help their case, because they don't cuss. That's not the type of family they are. They yell and scream and, you know, say all kinds of crazy shit to each other, but they do not curse. So that part was really weird. That was off-putting. And that's one thing I did not like either. Other than the fact that the show was not funny. If you grew up with the show and rewatched it, then you'll understand what I mean when you watch this show, whatever this show is, because I don't even consider it part of the Malcolm in the Middle universe. Because it's different, and not the good kind of way. Like, I don't know, it's not funny. It's not funny at all. I mean, they hyped it up so much that I actually thought it was going to be something. And I know there was this kind of analogy I heard in the movie, but I can't remember exactly what it was. It's like I was expecting like a really awesome gift, and I got socks. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. Yeah, but they hyped it up so much that it made it even worse. If they wouldn't have hyped it up so much, then maybe it wouldn't have been so disappointing. But it was very disappointing. And, well, I don't know what everyone else is going to say about this show, or what you're thinking, or whatever. I mean, Google says that nobody's really, you know, a fan of the show. Maybe just a tiny %, I guess. But it's not good. Like I said, and if you want to watch this show, I'd suggest you watch the original one. That way you'd understand the things that I'm saying and why I'm saying them. Because it would explain why this revival made no sense. If you do it in reverse, then you won't understand why the original is the way it is, even though that is the baseline. That is the bread and butter, or whatever, of the show in general. That's the actual characters and how they are, and whatever Lois says, that's what goes. That's another thing that made no sense between her and Malcolm, their little conversation that he was saying that she was putting so much pressure on him to be the president or whatever. And in this show, she said, "Oh no, that was just a plan. I wasn't expecting that from you, blah, blah, blah." That's not true. If you watch the original show, you know that's not true. Everything Lois says goes. That's what's going to happen. No matter what, you do what she says. And it made sense because in the original show, when she tells Malcolm that, it's because she wants him to become somebody that helps people like them. Poor people, you know, or struggling families, you know, struggling with money, struggling with just basic living situations or whatever. That would have made sense too if he was some kind of person like that. I don't know what kind of person would be. I wouldn't expect him to be president in the show, but, you know, somebody that could actually help. Not what they made him out to be, some guy that worked in charity, which, I don't know. I guess they were trying with that, but it didn't really make sense. You know, I don't know. I think they could have gone a better way about that. But again, it was not good. I didn't like it. It didn't make any sense. I feel like I wasted time watching it. It was overhyped. And all the interviews, they made it seem like it was awesome. Like, they loved doing it. Of course they loved doing it. They loved the reunion. It was... I guess that was great, whatever. They should have done more like other shows do. After a certain amount of time, do like a little mini reunion, get some interviews from like a host, or answer questions from the audience. Something like that would have made more sense rather than doing this, because they were cramming so much crap into this 4 episodes that it just made it even worse. And they were trying to be funny like in the original show, but nothing was subtle. It was all in your face, so it made no sense. But, you know, you guys think what you think. Watch it, don't watch it, whatever. This is just my opinion, my review, if you will. And if you watched this till the end, listened, then that's great. If not, then that's fine too. But you wouldn't know that unless you actually finished it. But, yeah, I was not a fan. But, you know, do what you want. I mean, watch it, don't watch it. And now I'm rambling. So,